I stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom, watching my father wrap my camera in newspaper like it was garbage. The Nikon D850 I'd saved for 3 years to buy. The one I'd used to capture every sunset over the harbour, every street musician in the downtown square, every moment that made me feel like I had something worth saying. He folded the paper corners over the lens with the same efficiency he used when throwing out expired milk. "Dad, please, I need that for the exhibition next month." He didn't look up. "Your sister needs a laptop for medical school applications. This is worth more." "I earned that money. I worked doubles at the diner. And we've fed and housed you for 22 years. My mother's voice cut through from the hallway. Sharp, final. "Violet needs this opportunity, Eleanor. You can take pictures with your phone." I watched my father place the camera in a box. Violet stood behind them, her face carefully neutral. But I saw it, that flicker of satisfaction in her eyes before she looked away. She'd always been good at that, looking away just when it mattered. "The exhibition is a hobby," my mother said. "Violet's future is medicine. That's a real career." The box was sealed. I heard the tape screech across the cardboard, and something in my chest went quiet. Not loud and breaking, just quiet, like a door closing in an empty room. They sold it that afternoon. I saw the transaction on my father's phone when he left it on the kitchen counter. $800 to a collector across town. The money transferred immediately. Violet's new laptop arrived 2 days later. Silver, pristine, with a little apple glowing on the lid. She set it up at the kitchen table while my mother hovered, excited, asking questions about processing speed and memory capacity like she understood any of it. I stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. She never said thank you. She never even acknowledged it. But I remembered. I remembered every shift at the diner where my feet ached and my hands smelled like grease. Every weekend I'd skipped plans to work an extra 4 hours. Every dollar I'd counted, recounted, saved in a shoebox under my bed because I didn't trust myself with a bank account I could access easily. 3 years of saving. 3 years of wanting. Gone in an afternoon. I stopped trying to explain after that. What was the point? They'd decided long ago what mattered and what didn't. Violet's accomplishments lined the hallway in frames, Dean's List certificates, scholarship letters, a photo from her hospital volunteer work where she wore scrubs and a competent smile. My photographs stayed in shoeboxes under my bed. The ones I'd printed, anyway. The rest lived on a hard drive they didn't know existed. The hard drive was my secret. 2 terabytes of work spanning 5 years. Portraits of people they'd never met. Landscapes from places they'd never asked about. Street photography that captured the city they lived in, but never really saw. I backed it up religiously, kept copies in 3 different places. It was the only thing I owned that felt entirely mine. I found work at a small community centre, teaching photography to kids who came after school. The pay was minimal, barely enough to cover gas and the occasional meal out. But I liked the quiet of it. The way children saw light differently, noticed things adults had trained themselves to ignore. One girl, Maria, had an eye for shadows that reminded me why I'd started taking pictures in the first place. She was 8 and saw the world like it was made of secrets, waiting to be uncovered. "Miss Eleanor, why do shadows have colours?" she asked once, holding up a photo she'd taken of the playground at sunset. "Because light isn't just white," I told her. "It's every colour mixed together. And shadows are what's left when some colours get taken away." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Like the world was just that simple and beautiful. I wished I could see things that clearly again. But at home, I was invisible. Dinner conversations revolved around Violet's MCAT scores, her interview at Johns Hopkins, the prestigious residency programs already interested in her. My parents glowed when they talked about her. They leaned forward, asked questions, remembered details. My mother had started keeping a folder of Violet's acceptance letters and scholarship offers. She showed them to relatives, to neighbours, to anyone who'd look. When I mentioned the community centre, my mother nodded absently and passed the salt. When I told them about Maria's first solo exhibition, a collection of her shadow photos displayed in the centre's hallway, my father said, "That's nice," without looking up from his newspaper. When I brought home a small cheque from selling a print to a local cafe owner, Violet said, "You got paid for a picture? How much?" And when I told her, she laughed. Not meanly exactly, just dismissively, like it was cute that I thought $75 was something to celebrate. I started eating in my room. The walls up there were covered with my own prints. Not the best ones, those were in the portfolio I was building, but good ones. A series of the harbour at different times of day. Street musicians I'd befriended over years of patient documentation. The old factory on the east side where kids went to drink, and lovers went to hide in light fell, through broken windows like it was searching for something it had lost. I looked at those photos every night and remembered that I was good at something. That I had a voice, even if nobody in this house wanted to hear it. The night of my exhibition, I got dressed in silence. I'd borrowed a friend's camera, an older Canon that didn't focus quite right, that had a stuck pixel in the sensor that showed up as a tiny bright spot in every image. I'd learned to work around it, to crop it out or position it where it might look intentional. I'd submitted my portfolio anyway, 20 photographs that represented 5 years of work. Against odds that felt insurmountable, the Community Arts Board had accepted me. 20 of my photographs would hang in the downtown gallery for 2 weeks. Small white labels with my name in clean black type. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I came downstairs in the black dress I'd thrifted. Simple, elegant, the kind of thing that made me feel like I could be someone important. I'd practiced walking in the heels I'd borrowed from my roommate. I'd done my makeup carefully, watched 3 tutorials to get the eyeliner right. "Where are you going?" my mother asked from the couch. "My exhibition? It opens tonight at 7. She glanced at the clock. "Violet has her medical school acceptance dinner. We made reservations weeks ago at Bellissimo. You know how hard it is to get a table there." "I told you about this a month ago." "Did you?" She looked genuinely puzzled, like I'd made it up. "Well, this is important for your sister. You understand?" I understood perfectly. My father walked in, adjusting his tie. "Eleanor, you'll need to give us a ride to the restaurant. My car's in the shop." "I'm going to my exhibition." "Can't you do that another night?" I stared at him. The gallery was open for 2 weeks, but the opening reception was tonight. The one night when the curator would be there, when other artists would attend, when people from the arts community would come to see new work. The one night that mattered. "No," I said. "I can't." My mother sighed. "Eleanor, don't be difficult. This is a big night for Violet." "It's a big night for me too." "Taking pictures isn't the same as medical school," my mother said. Not cruelly, just factually, like it was so obvious that it didn't need to be debated. I left. I walked out the door and drove to the gallery alone, and I didn't look back at the house where they were probably already calling a taxi, already annoyed with me for being inconvenient. The gallery was small, tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and espresso. The light inside was golden and warm, track lighting positioned to make every photograph glow like it held its own small sun. My photographs lined the walls in 2 rows, matted in white, framed in simple black wood. My name was on the wall by the entrance. Eleanor Chen, photographer. I touched the letters. They were real. Vinyl, pressed flat, permanent for the next 2 weeks. People came. More than I'd expected. 30, maybe 40 over the course of the evening. Strangers who stood in front of my work and actually looked. Not glanced, looked. Stood still and let their eyes move over the images, reading them like stories. One woman cried at the photograph of the violin player under the bridge. She stood there for 5 minutes, tears running down her face, and when she finally walked away, she touched the wall beside the frame, like she was saying goodbye to someone. A man in a wool coat asked if I did commissions. He owned a restaurant downtown and wanted photographs of his kitchen staff, the people whose faces customers never saw. "The way you see people," he said, "it's like you know them, like you love them." I didn't know how to explain that I did love them, that every person I photographed was someone I'd watched long enough to understand, that I never took a picture until I saw the thing that made them human. The gallery owner, Mrs. Patterson, told me I had a rare eye for human dignity. She was 70-something, elegant in the way of women who'd spent their lives around art. She touched my shoulder and said, "You're going to do important work, Eleanor. I can tell." I felt something crack open inside me, not breaking, opening, like a window I didn't know was closed. 3 people bought prints that night. Small ones, 8 by 10s, but still. 3 people wanted to take my work home, wanted to live with it, wanted to see it every day. I made $225. Mrs. Patterson took her commission and handed me the rest in cash. Crisp bills that felt impossibly significant. "Keep going," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you this doesn't matter." I wanted to tell her it was too late for that, but I just smiled and said thank you. When I got home, the house was bright with celebration. Violet had been accepted to Johns Hopkins. Early acceptance, full scholarship, a personal letter from the Dean of Admissions praising her volunteer work and research potential. There was champagne, the expensive kind my parents saved for major occasions, and my father's eyes were wet with pride. My mother was on the phone with my aunt, her voice high and joyful, recounting every detail of Violet's acceptance letter like it was scripture. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, still wearing my thrifted black dress, still holding the envelope of cash from the gallery. "How was your thing?" Violet asked, not looking up from her phone. "Good. That's nice." She smiled vaguely and returned to texting, probably her boyfriend, probably sharing the good news with someone who'd be appropriately impressed. Nobody asked to see photographs. Nobody asked who came or what they said or if I'd sold anything. My mother hugged Violet again, and my father refilled her glass, and I walked upstairs to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed in the dark. The opening in my chest widened. Not rage, something colder, clearer, like looking at a photograph and seeing exactly what it was, without any soft focus or flattering light, just the truth, stark and unavoidable. They didn't see me. They never had, and they never would. I could be good. I was good, and it wouldn't matter. I could sell every photograph, win every award, be praised by every expert in the field, and they'd still introduce me as our other daughter, the one who takes pictures. So I stopped, waiting for them to see. I worked 3 jobs that year: the community centre, weekend shifts at the diner, and freelance photography for small businesses that needed product shots and website images. The work was boring. Bottles of wine on white backgrounds, headshots for real estate agents, the occasional wedding when I was desperate. But it paid. I saved everything. I stopped buying coffee, stopped going out, stopped pretending I was part of the family dinners, where Violet's name was the only one that mattered. I ate cereal for dinner most nights, took the same sad sandwich to work every day, wore the same 3 outfits in rotation because I couldn't justify buying anything new. My parents didn't notice. They were too busy planning Violet's going away party, her dorm furniture shopping, her celebration dinners with relatives who wanted to congratulate her. I wasn't invited to most of them. Or maybe I was and nobody told me. It was hard to tell the difference. I applied to a documentary photography program in New York. A long shot program, competitive and prestigious. the kind my parents would have noticed if it had Violet's name attached. The program was run through the International Center for Photography, partnered with Columbia University, and only accepted 12 students a year from a pool of over 500 applicants. I submitted my portfolio, the Harbour series, the Street Musicians, the Factory Ruins, and a new series I'd been working on about invisible labour, about the people who cleaned office buildings at night and cooked in restaurant kitchens and collected garbage at dawn. I wrote a personal essay about invisibility and what it means to be seen, about how a camera can be an act of witness, of saying, "You matter," to people the world has decided to ignore. I mailed it in December and tried not to think about it. January came. Violet left for Johns Hopkins with 3 suitcases and a new wardrobe my mother had spent weeks shopping for. They drove her down, spent 3 days helping her settle in, came back with stories about how impressive the campus was, how brilliant her roommate seemed, how Violet was exactly where she was meant to be. I got my acceptance letter 2 days after they returned. I was checking the mail when I saw the envelope. Thick, cream-coloured, the ICP logo embossed in the corner. My hand shook opening it. Full scholarship. Living stipend included. A spot in their winter intensive studying under acclaimed documentary photographer James Morrison, whose work I'd studied obsessively for years, whose book, American Twilight, sat dog-eared on my nightstand. I read the letter 3 times to make sure it was real. I told my parents at dinner. I waited until my mother had served the pot roast, until everyone had food on their plates. I tried to sound casual, like it was just another piece of news. I got into a documentary photography program in New York. My mother looked up. "That's great, honey. When does it start?" "January, next week. I'll be gone for 2 years. 2 years? My father frowned. "What about helping out here? Your mother needs help with the garden renovation this spring." I stared at him. The garden renovation. They wanted me to stay home for landscaping. I got into one of the most competitive programs in the country. 12 spots, 500 applicants. "It's just photography, Eleanor?" My mother cut her pot roast into precise pieces. "It's not like it's medical school. It's my career." "Photography isn't a career, sweetheart. It's a hobby. You need something stable. Maybe you could do it on weekends once you find a real job." I set down my fork. Very carefully. Like if I moved too fast, something would shatter. "This is a real job. I'll be studying under James Morrison. Do you know who that is?" "Should we?" my father asked. "He's one of the most important documentary photographers alive. He's had work in the Museum of Modern Art. He's won a Pulitzer Prize." My mother sighed. "That's wonderful for him, but you need to think practically. How will you support yourself?" "There's a stipend, $20,000 a year, and I can freelance." $20,000? Eleanor, Violet's starting salary as a resident will be... "I don't care what Violet makes." Silence. They both looked at me like I'd said something shocking. "I'm going," I said. "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you." Violet was quiet through all of this. She pushed her food around her plate, and for a moment I thought I saw something in her face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. But she didn't speak. She never spoke up for me. Not once in 22 years. I left in January. They didn't come to the airport. My mother said she had a hair appointment. My father had work. Violet didn't offer an excuse. She just texted "good luck" with a smiley face emoji. I took a taxi at 4 a.m, my 2 suitcases and camera bag loaded in the trunk, and I didn't cry. I watched our house disappear in the rearview mirror and felt nothing but relief. New York swallowed me whole, and I let it. The program was intense. We met every morning at 8, reviewed each other's work with a brutality that was somehow kind, learned from photographers who'd documented wars and famines and moments of impossible beauty, James Morrison was exactly as brilliant and demanding as I'd hoped. He looked at my Harbour series for 30 seconds and said, "You're afraid of getting too close. Fix that." So I got closer. I photographed subway musicians at 3 a.m, sat with them between sets, learned their names and their stories and the reasons they played underground instead of in concert halls. There was a cellist named David who'd studied at Juilliard until his hands were injured in a car accident. He couldn't play professionally anymore, couldn't manage the speed and precision required for orchestral work, but he could still play slowly, beautifully, in the echoing tunnels, where nobody cared if he made mistakes. I photographed him over 3 months. He let me into his life, into his tiny apartment in Queens, where he lived with 2 roommates and practiced 4 hours a day, even though it hurt. I captured the way he closed his eyes when he played, the way his broken hand still made something whole. That series became my first real recognition. James Morrison submitted it to a competition I'd never heard of, and I won 2nd place and a $1,000 prize. The photos were published in a photography journal. Strangers saw my work and knew my name. I called home to tell them. My mother answered, "Oh, Eleanor, can I call you back? We're at Violet's white coat ceremony." "Mum, I won a competition. My work is being published." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I really have to go. Text me the details." I never texted. She never asked again. I documented the changing faces of immigrant neighbourhoods in Queens, spent weeks in family-owned restaurants and corner bodegas, captured the way communities held themselves together against gentrification and displacement. I photographed weddings and funerals, birthday parties and going out of business sales, the ordinary moments that felt sacred when you paid attention. I spent 6 weeks with a family from Bangladesh who ran a small grocery on Roosevelt Avenue. The grandmother, Nazrin, spoke almost no English, but communicated in smiles and cups of tea and plates of food she insisted I eat. She showed me photos of the home they'd left, the family still there, the life they traded for the promise of something better. "You see us," she said through her granddaughter's translation. Most people look, but you see." I tried to explain that was the point, that photography was about witness, about saying, "You exist and you matter." But my Bengali was non-existent and the granddaughter's English was limited, so we just smiled at each other and understood in the way that transcends language. That series won a grant, $5,000 to continue documenting immigrant communities. My work was featured in an exhibition at the Queen's Museum. 50 people came to the opening. The local city council member gave a speech about the importance of preserving cultural heritage. I sent my parents the exhibition announcement. They didn't respond. In my 2nd year, James Morrison selected me for his international documentary project, a year-long study of young artists in post-industrial cities. We travelled to 7 countries, documenting artists who worked in the ruins of industries that had abandoned their communities. Welders making sculptures from factory scraps, musicians recording albums in empty warehouses, dancers performing in shuttered textile mills. "You have the eye for this," James said. "You understand what it means to create in spaces that have decided you don't matter." I knew he was right. I'd been doing it my whole life. The project was funded by a major foundation, all expenses paid plus a salary that was more than I'd ever made. I'd be gone for 18 months. My work would be featured in exhibitions across Europe, and eventually in a feature-length documentary James was producing with a team of filmmakers from Berlin. I called home to tell them. My mother answered, "Oh, Eleanor, can I call you back? We're shopping for furniture for Violet's new apartment. She got that fellowship, remember?" "Mom, I'm going to be in a documentary, an international one. We're travelling to 7 countries." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Send pictures." She hung up before I could respond. I left for Europe in September. We started in Manchester, documenting the artist communities that had grown in abandoned textile factories. I photographed welders, their faces lit by sparks, creating massive sculptures from industrial debris. I photographed painters who worked in spaces so cold they wore gloves with the fingers cut off. I photographed performers who staged plays in warehouses that had once produced cotton and wool, and now produced only art and stubbornness. In Berlin, I met a graffiti artist named Klaus, who painted murals on buildings scheduled for demolition. "They'll be gone in 6 months," he said, gesturing at a 5-story portrait of his grandmother, "but they'll exist now, that matters." I understood that, the temporary permanence of art, the way it mattered even when it didn't last. In Prague, I documented glass blowers working in a factory that had been making crystal for 200 years. The factory was closing, cheaper production in China, changing markets, the usual story. But these artists kept working, teaching apprentices who might never find jobs in their trade, preserving techniques that were centuries old. "What will you do when it closes?" I asked the master glassblower, a man named Joseph whose hands were scarred from 50 years of heat and sharp edges. "Keep blowing glass," he said simply. What else would I do? I photographed him at his furnace, the molten glass glowing like a small sun, his face peaceful in a way I recognized. The peace of doing what you were meant to do, regardless of whether anyone was watching. The documentary project consumed 2 years of my life. James and the film crew followed me and the other photographers, capturing not just our work but our process, our conversations, the way we saw the world. It was invasive and intimate and exhausting. The camera was always there, recording every moment of doubt, every breakthrough, every night I cried from homesickness or frustration, or the overwhelming weight of trying to do justice to people's lives. James interviewed me dozens of times, asked about my background, my influences, my reasons for making art, and in one interview, late at night in a hotel in Lisbon, after a 15-hour shooting day, he asked about my family. Do they support your work? I was too tired to lie. They sold my camera to buy my sister a laptop. The camera kept rolling. James leaned forward. Tell me about that. So I did. I told him about saving for 3 years, about the Nikon D850, about watching my father wrap it in newspaper like garbage, about the exhibition I'd attended alone, about being invisible in my own home. But you kept working, James said. Of course, what else would I do? That interview became the centerpiece of my segment in the documentary. The film, titled Invisible Hands, Artists of the New Century, took 3 years to edit. James was a perfectionist, cutting and recutting until every frame said exactly what he wanted it to say. I saw rough cuts, gave notes, watched my own life turned into narrative. It was strange and uncomfortable and occasionally beautiful. The documentary premiered at Sundance in January. I flew to Utah not knowing what to expect. It was a different world, industry people in expensive parkas, celebrities I recognized from movies, an energy that felt both thrilling and alienating. The screening was in a theatre that held 300 people. It sold out. I sat in the back row, my hands shaking, watching my work appear on a screen 40 feet wide. My segment was 15 minutes long. It opened with the harbour photographs, the ones I'd taken with the camera my parents sold, now displayed huge and luminous and impossibly beautiful. Then my interview, talking about invisibility and what it means to be seen. Then footage of me working, teaching the kids at the community centre, photographing David the cellist, sitting with Nasrin over tea. The audience was silent. The kind of silence that feels like attention, like witness. When my segment ended, someone started clapping. Then, everyone. The sound filled the theatre, thunderous and overwhelming, and I sat in the dark and cried. The film won the Documentary Feature Award. My name was in the credits. The next day, articles appeared in Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, IndieWire. My photographs were everywhere. My story, the sold camera, the family that didn't see me, became a narrative people latched onto. Eleanor Chen proves that artistic vision survives even without support, one reviewer wrote. A masterclass in seeing the overlooked, wrote another. My parents didn't know. I hadn't told them about Sundance, hadn't mentioned the premiere or the award or the gallery representation I'd secured afterward. I hadn't told them about anything in years. Our phone calls were brief and functional. I was alive, I was working, everything was fine. They never asked for details. I never offered them. I was tired of performing for an empty audience. But here's the thing about success. It gets loud, it spreads, and eventually it finds its way home. 3 months after Sundance, Mardua's Invisible Hands was acquired by a major streaming platform. They paid an amount that made James laugh with disbelief, launched it with a full publicity campaign, positioned it as their prestige documentary for awards season. It became unexpectedly popular. One of those cultural moments nobody predicts. People watched it, discussed it, shared clips on social media. My segment went viral, the quote about not stopping when someone takes your tools, the image of my hands holding a borrowed camera, the shots of the harbour that had started everything. Articles appeared in arts magazines, film journals, national newspapers. The New York Times ran a profile. NPR did an interview. My Instagram followers went from 800 to 80,000 in a month. Someone from my hometown recognised the harbour locations, posted about it, tagged the local news. Did you know Eleanor Chen, the photographer from Invisible Hands, is from here? The local news reached out to my parents. I wasn't there when it happened. I was in Portugal, photographing fishing communities for my next project, sleeping in a hotel that smelled like salt and grilled sardines. But my friend Jessica, who still lived in our hometown, told me everything. She called me at 2 a.m, Portugal time, laughing and shocked. Eleanor, you need to see this. The news crew showed up at your parents' house. She sent me the video. I watched it on my phone, sitting on the hotel balcony, with the ocean dark and vast before me. The news crew was young and enthusiastic, clearly excited about the hometown artist angle. They knocked on my parents' door with cameras ready. My mother answered, hair perfect, smile practiced, the smile she used for neighbours and strangers. Mrs. Chen, we're from Channel 7 News. We'd love to talk to you about your daughter, Eleanor. Of course. What has Violet done now? She was already stepping back, gesturing them inside, ready to show off. Actually, we're here about Eleanor, the documentary photographer. My mother's smile froze, just for a second, then rearranged itself into confusion. Eleanor? Yes, she's featured prominently in the Sundance-winning documentary Invisible Hands. Her work has been exhibited internationally. We'd love to talk about your family's support of her artistic development. There was a long pause. The camera caught it. The moment my mother's face changed as she realised she'd gotten it wrong, had been getting it wrong. My father appeared behind her. I'm sorry, what is this about? Your daughter, Eleanor, the photographer. She's become quite prominent in the art world. Eleanor? My father looked genuinely confused. She takes pictures, yes. Is this for a local interest piece? The reporter's smile became more fixed. Professional. Sir, your daughter is one of the most promising documentary photographers of her generation. Her work has been exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art, the Queen's Museum, and galleries across Europe. The documentary she's featured in won at Sundance and is currently streaming on Netflix. It's in the top 10. My parents stared at him. Would you like to see some clips? The reporter pulled out an iPad. They filmed the whole thing. My parents watching the documentary clips, their faces changing as they realised what they'd missed. My mother's hand went to her throat, that nervous gesture she had when she'd miscalculated something important. My father went very still, the way he did when he was trying to control his emotions. Violet was there too, home for the weekend. She watched the clips without expression, but her hands were clenched in her lap. The reporter showed them my segment. The harbour photographs, huge and luminous on the Sundance screen. My interview about invisibility, about being overlooked in my own home, about finding worth in my own eyes when nobody else was looking. The quote about the camera they sold. My parents sold it to buy my sister a laptop. I borrowed a friend's camera and kept working. You don't stop making art because someone takes your tools. You find new tools. The camera captured my mother's face as I said that. Captured the moment she understood what it meant. What she'd done. She started crying, not delicate tears, actual sobs. The interview continued, but Jessica said it got worse. The reporter asked how they'd supported my early work. We always knew she was talented, my mother said, recovering slightly. Did you attend her early exhibitions? Silence. Her first exhibition at the community gallery. Did the family attend? More silence. My father cleared his throat. We had a conflict that evening. Violet's medical school acceptance dinner. I see. And financially? Did you help fund her equipment or education? We had limited resources, my father said stiffly. Violet was pursuing medicine, which required significant investment. Eleanor understood that. Did she? Because in the documentary she talks about working 3 jobs to fund her own education while living at home. She mentions that you sold her camera, which she'd saved for 3 years to buy, to purchase a laptop for Violet. The silence stretched. Violet looked down at her hands. We didn't realise, my mother said finally. We didn't understand what she was doing, what it meant. The reporter, to his credit, didn't push further. He wrapped up the interview, thanked them for their time, left them sitting in their living room with the iPad still showing my face on that Sundance screen. The news station edited it into a 3-minute piece about local talent. They were kind enough not to include my parents' most uncomfortable moments. But people who knew us, who'd watched Violet get everything while I got nothing, they understood what the silences meant. The segment aired on the evening news. Then it was posted online. Then it was picked up by other outlets because the story had everything. Local girl makes good, family doesn't notice, the dramatic irony of them finding out on camera. It went viral. Not huge viral, but enough. Enough that my phone started ringing at 3 a.m. in Portugal with calls from my mother. Enough that I woke up to 17 text messages from Violet. Enough that my father left a voicemail that was just him breathing for 30 seconds before hanging up. I didn't answer. I turned off my phone and went down to the harbour where the fishermen were preparing their boats. I photographed them in the pre-dawn light, their hands rough and capable, their faces as peaceful with routine. I did my work. I didn't think about home. But the messages kept coming. When I finally listened to them, days later they were what I expected. My mother crying, saying she didn't realise, saying she was sorry, saying she wanted to make things right. My father, stiff and awkward, asking when I'd be home next, suggesting we reconnect. Violet sent a long text message. She said she'd always known it was unfair, that she'd felt guilty for years, that she wanted to fix things between us. I read them all in a cafe in Lisbon. Rain streaked the windows. I had a coffee and a notebook full of ideas for the fishing community project. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and bread, and someone was playing fado music on a small speaker, that Portuguese blues that sounds like beautiful sadness. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant. I felt quiet. That same quiet from years ago when they sealed my camera in a box. But this time, the quiet wasn't emptiness. It was peace. The peace of knowing I'd been right. That I was good. That I'd built something real without them. Their validation, years too late, didn't change anything. I was already who I'd become. I wrote back eventually. Brief, polite messages. I told my mother I appreciated her apology, but needed time. I told my father I'd consider visiting. I told Violet that I understood, but understanding didn't erase years of being invisible. I told them all that I was busy with work, that I'd be in Europe for another 6 months, that we could talk when I returned. I didn't cut them off. I just created distance, healthy distance, the kind where I could exist fully without their validation or their guilt. The documentary continued to gain attention. I did interviews, magazines, podcasts, radio shows. People asked about my family. I was honest, but not cruel. I said we'd had different values, different definitions of success. I said I'd learnt to validate my own work when nobody else would. I said forgiveness was a process. I didn't say I was still angry. I didn't need to be angry anymore. My work continued. More exhibitions, more projects, more recognition. I was commissioned to photograph a series on climate change's impact on coastal communities. I was offered a teaching position at Columbia. I was invited to join the Magnum Photos agency, joining the ranks of the most prestigious documentary photographers in the world. I photographed what moved me, told stories that mattered, made visible the things people preferred not to see. And always, in the back of my mind, I carried that image, my father wrapping my camera in newspaper, the tape screeching across cardboard, the moment I understood that I was alone. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just information. This is who they were. This is who I became despite them. 2 years after the documentary premiered, I was invited to give a talk at a photography conference in Boston. It was close to home, just 2 hours away. I hadn't been back since I left for New York 6 years earlier. My parents asked if they could attend. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe completion. Maybe I just wanted to see them see me. They sat in the back row. I saw them when I took the stage, my mother in a blue dress, my father in his good suit, Violet beside them in black. They looked smaller than I remembered, older, nervous. I gave my talk. I showed my work, the Harbour series, the subway musicians, the immigrant communities, the post-industrial artists, the fishing communities. I discussed my process, my ethics, my belief that documentary photography was an act of love. I answered questions about how to see people truly, how to earn trust, how to bear witness without exploitation. I didn't mention them. I didn't need to. My work spoke for itself. Afterward, at the reception, they approached carefully, like I might disappear if they moved too fast. "You were wonderful," my mother said. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. "Thank you." "We had no idea," my father said. We didn't understand what you were doing, what it meant." I looked at them, really looked. They'd aged more than 6 years should account for. My mother's hair was almost entirely grey now. My father's hand shook slightly. Violet looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with residency hours. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I tried to tell you," I said quietly. "For years." "We know." My mother's voice cracked. "We know, and we're sorry. We were so focused on what we understood, medicine, traditional success, that we couldn't see what was right in front of us. We couldn't see you." Violet stepped forward. "I used that laptop for 2 years and felt guilty every day. I watched you struggle with borrowed equipment and I said nothing. I took what you'd earned and I never even thanked you. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. I could have been cruel. Could have listed every dinner where they'd ignored me, every achievement they'd missed, every moment I'd needed them, and they'd chosen Violet instead. Could have detailed every phone call they'd cut short, Every exhibition they'd skipped, every time they'd introduced me as our other daughter, like I was an afterthought. But standing there looking at their faces, I realised something. Their regret wasn't my burden. Their guilt wasn't my responsibility. I'd already built a life that didn't require their approval. Their recognition now, years too late, didn't change who I'd become. It just closed a circle. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it, not because they'd earned it, but because I didn't want to carry it anymore, because forgiveness was lighter than resentment, and I was tired of being heavy. My mother hugged me. She held on too long, trembling, crying into my shoulder. My father's eyes were wet. He touched my arm hesitantly, like he was asking permission. Violet whispered, "Thank you," against my shoulder, and I felt her tears through my shirt. We talked for an hour. They asked real questions this time. About my work, my projects, the places I'd been. They asked about James Morrison, about the documentary, about what it felt like to see my work on a 40-foot screen. They listened like they were memorizing it, trying to fill in years of blanks, trying to understand the person I'd become without them. My mother asked about the fishing communities project. My father asked about Magnum Photos, if I was nervous about joining. Violet asked what I was working on next. And when I told her about the Climate Change Commission, she said, "That sounds important, really important." It was the first time any of them had said my work was important. When we said goodbye, my mother asked if I'd come home for Thanksgiving. "Maybe," I said. "I'll let you know." I didn't promise. I didn't owe them promises. But I didn't slam the door either. I left it open, just a crack. Room for possibility without commitment. My father gave me his business card with his new cell number written on the back. "Cool, sometime, even just to talk." Violet hugged me one more time. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I should have said that years ago. I should have said it every day." I nodded, accepted it, let it be true without needing to respond. I left with something I hadn't expected, not forgiveness. I'd already given that. Not reconciliation. That would take years if it happened at all. Something quieter, something like closure. The circle was complete. They'd sold my camera. I'd become someone anyway. They hadn't seen me. I'd learned to see myself. They'd chosen Violet. I'd chosen me. And now they knew. Now they had to live with knowing. That was enough. I flew back to Portugal the next morning. The fishing community project was waiting. There was work to do, stories to tell, light to capture before it changed. My phone buzzed with a text from Violet as the plane took off. "I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I'm saying it now, for whatever it's worth." I looked out the window at the clouds, that endless expanse of white and blue and possibility. I texted back, "I'm proud of me too." And I was. Not because they finally saw me, but because I'd seen myself all along. Because I'd built myself from nothing, from a sold camera and borrowed equipment and 3 jobs and nights alone in my room. From invisibility, I'd made myself visible. The documentary still streams. Sometimes I get messages from young photographers who watched it, who felt invisible in their own homes, who needed to know that their work mattered even when nobody else thought so. I tell them what I learned. Your worth isn't determined by who notices. Your art doesn't require permission. And sometimes the greatest power is the quiet certainty that you don't need validation from people who refused to give it when it mattered. Create anyway, work anyway, become anyway. I built myself from nothing and made it everything. That documentary, the one my parents discovered on the news, the one with my camera's photographs projected 40 feet wide, the one that won at Sundance and changed my life. It wasn't vindication. It was simply the truth. I had always been here, creating, working, becoming, growing into myself despite them, finding my voice in the silence they created. They just hadn't been looking. but I had been, and that made all the difference. I look at my reflection in the airplane window now, and I see someone I recognize. Someone I built carefully, piece by piece, photograph by photograph. Someone who learned that being unseen doesn't mean you don't exist. It just means you exist for yourself first. And that's the truest kind of existence there is. The camera they sold sits in a museum now. I found it, tracked down the collector who bought it, made him an offer he couldn't refuse. It's in a glass case at the International Centre for Photography, part of an exhibition about the tools that shaped contemporary documentary work. There's a placard beside it explaining its history. The story of a young photographer whose family sold her camera, who kept working anyway, who became someone despite them. People stand in front of that case and take pictures of it. The irony isn't lost on me. But here's what they don't know, what isn't on the placard. I don't need that camera anymore. I haven't needed it for years. It's a symbol now, a piece of history, but it's not what made me who I am. I made me who I am. Every photograph I took with borrowed equipment, every time I chose to see when I was being overlooked, every moment I said, "This matters," when nobody else would. That's what made me. The plane levels out above the clouds. Portugal waits below, full of fishermen and morning light and stories I haven't told yet. My camera bag sits at my feet, a new Nikon, top of the line, paid for with money I earned from work I'm proud of. I close my eyes and feel the quiet again. That same quiet that's followed me since the day they sealed my camera in a box. But now I understand what it is. It's not emptiness. It's not resignation. It's peace, the peace of knowing I am enough. I always was. They sold my camera for her laptop. After Rebirth, they found it in a documentary about me. But I was never reborn. I was always becoming. They just weren't watching. And in the end, that was their loss, not mine.